What's really interesting to me is I've watched that come full circle with the Clark decision here in Idaho. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it,
Hmm.
but it's a recent decision from the Supreme Court here in Idaho, which has actually taken us back 20 years.
Can
And
you explain a little bit about it? Because I
yeah,
don't know anything about it.
yeah. So basically, what the law says is we were really treating domestic violence issues like they were felonies. So we had probable cause to believe we would arrest that violator. Well, under the interpretation of the Supreme Court, you have to have witnessed the crime or you have to have someone sign the complaint that witnessed the crime. And you can't charge it the way you would a felony, which is probable cause, right? If you have probable cause to believe it occurred. So the Clark decision took us back to how it was back in the 1980s, um, about the victim has to sign the citation against the perpetrator, who is quite often um, the significant other
Right.
of that person. And so they don't want to sign the citation, rightfully so. And
Yeah.
we could step in. Now we have to have traumatic injury in order to be able to take it down the felony pathway. We have to have a traumatic injury.
Do you think that's better or worse?
It's much worse, in my opinion,
Okay.
because before we could make a definitive stop and we could force this family into the court to talk to the court. Now it's not happening that way, and it really did take us back, 25 years
Mm.
in enforcement. It's just the terrain we're standing on, but what it's going to require is a constitutional amendment to take us back to how we were treating domestic violence, say, from 1990 forward until just recently. I think that Clark decision was 3 years ago. And so the deputies today are dealing with what it looked like prior to my career starting. But I remember those stories, and I remember having a pretty pointed discussion with my first sheriff about the fact that we could charge this guy based on the training I had received.
Yeah.
But it was kind of clawing out that, look, if you hit your significant other, we're going to take you to jail.
Right.
I mean, that was really the stance that we took, and it was about better enforcement of domestic violence. And so I saw pretty much the same type of violence calls in Clark County as I saw here in Bonneville. The difference was I usually had more deputies around me to help, right?
Yeah.
So wherein I might not have been able to get that guy in cuffs right then, I might show up the next day in Clark County with a couple more cops.
And that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Were there situations where you showed up and you're like, I'm not dealing with this today. I'm going to come back and let it
Yeah,
go
sure.
down.
Or just get the person out of there that was the victim, right? And then leave it set. Yeah.
Mm.
You just had to be smart about how you enforce those things.
Mhm.
And there were a couple violent encounters where we had to fight people to the ground and that type of stuff.